Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain. So tonight, inshallah ta'ala, we'll go back to our discussion of fiqh al-tahara, the rules and regulations regarding purity and purification in Islam. And tonight our topic is going to be the nullifiers of ablution, nawaqid al-wudu, the nullifiers of ablution. And there's a few principles that guide this chapter of fiqh. There's a few principles that guide this chapter of fiqh. So basically certain things that you want to keep in mind as we go through this discussion of the nullifiers of ablution. The first principle is that if a person's ritual purity is established or confirmed with certainty, then that state of purity remains intact until equal or greater certainty of its nullification has been reached. Let me say that again and then I'll explain. If a person's ritual purity is established or confirmed with certainty, then that state of purity remains intact until equal or greater certainty of its nullification has been reached. So what does that mean? That means if a person is certain that they are pure, and then they become like they have some doubt about whether that purity has been what? Nullified. Then that doubt, that questioning doesn't nullify what? Their purity. And they remain, or they continue to apply to themselves the state of purity until what? Until certainty is reached that that purity has been nullified. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Everybody clear on that?
Yes.
So if you're certain that you're pure, you remain pure until what? Until you're certain that you're impure. The opposite is also what? The case. If you're certain that you're impure, then that impurity remains until you're certain that you are pure. And so shak, doubt, can never be the basis of what? Of purity or impurity. Okay, so you always go with what you are certain of. So let's say a person, they make wudu for salat al-dhuhr. They make salat al-dhuhr and then they go off and do some things. And the time for the asr comes. And then they say, did I go to the restroom? Did I pass wind? Did I take a nap? And they're what? They're questioning. They're not certain if they what? Nullify their purification. Then they remain what? They remain pure. And suppose a person, they went to the restroom, and then the time for salat comes in. And they say, well, I know I went to the restroom, but I'm not sure if I made wudu after I went to the restroom. So they go with what they're what? Certain of. I use the restroom, I'm what? Impure until I'm certain that I am pure. So that's one qaida, one rule in the bab. But the second principle is that the basic rule of thumb is that a thing is not a nullifier unless legal evidence can be provided that it is a nullifier. So the original rule is that something is not what? It's not a nullifier of wudu. So a person says, okay, if I...
Throw up.
Okay, we'll take that for now. If a person says, if I vomit, is vomit a nullifier? The original rule is that vomit is not what? It's not, unless we have proof to the contrary. Person says, I blew my nose and some blood came out with that phlegm or mucus. I said mucus. So now that blood that came out, does it break the wudu? The asl is what? It doesn't, unless we have proof to the contrary. That basically what I'm saying is that we can't say something is a nullifier until proven that it's not. No, it's the opposite. Something is not a nullifier until proven that it is. Okay? So if somebody says your wudu has been nullified because you did this, we say the burden of proof is on the one who said it nullifies or the one who said it isn't? The one who said it nullifies. All right, the last qaida that's important for this chapter is that if we don't find an evidence, an explicit evidence in the Quran, or an explicit, authentic evidence in the Sunnah that something is or isn't a nullifier, then we turn to what? Aqwal as-Sahaba. We turn to what? The statements, the narrations of the companions. Because nobody understood the deen better than who? Ashab Rasulullah. Nobody understood the deen better than them. And so it's not necessarily necessary that always we're going to have a hadith. We're always going to have an ayah. But sometimes we'll have a statement of who? A companion. And that's enough for us in the absence of what? Quran and hadith. Wadah? Okay? So sometimes we won't have an ayah. We won't have a hadith, but we'll have what? The statement of a companion or a group of companions that something is a nullifier. And that will be sufficient. Why? Because they would never say something about the deen unless what? Rasulullah taught them so. So that said, the nullifiers of wudu are 9. The nullifiers of wudu are 9 in number. The first one that the fuqaha mention is kullu kharij min as-sabilain. They say anything that exits from the private parts. Anything that exits from the private parts. Now this, it needs to be what? It needs to be explained and expanded on. Because if you just take it at face value, it'll give you the wrong impression. When you state it in this manner, everything that comes out of the private parts, that would mean that it encompasses what? Both pure and impure substances. So if something pure comes out, your wudu is broken. Something impure comes out, your wudu is broken. When they say kul kharij, everything that comes out, it means anything comes out of your private parts, then what? It's broken. Your wudu is broken, whether pure or impure, whether a small amount or a large amount. But is that really the case? The fact of the matter is that what? Everything that comes out of either one of the private parts, the front end or the back end, each one has its own separate what? Ruling. And we can't just say generally everything that comes out is what? Is a naqith, is something which nullifies. Also bear in mind what we said earlier, that the original rule is that something is not a nullifier until we have proof to the contrary. You guys with me? Remember that, bear that in mind. It's not a nullifier unless we have proof it's a nullifier. So the original rule is that anything comes out of the private parts is what? Is not a nullifier unless we have proof to the contrary. Okay? So that said, what are the substances that commonly exit from the private parts? And what are their rulings? So the first one is urine and feces. Urine and feces, right? These are the first substances that come out. These two are what? They're nullifiers. Bil ijma. They're nullifiers by agreement of the scholars. And the proof for that, beyond the ijma, is that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the things which will require you to make wudu in the Quran, He says, أَوْ جَاءَ أَحَدٌ مِّنْكُمْ مِنَ الْغَائِطِ أَوْ جَاءَ أَحَدٌ مِّنْكُمْ مِنَ الْغَائِطِ. He says, and if one of you comes from answering the call of nature. So he tells us that basically when we come from answering the call of nature, we have to what? Make wudu. So he's telling us that that's something to nullify. We also have the hadith of Safwan ibn Assal, when he talks about the wudu and the wiping over what? The socks. When did the Prophet allow us to wipe over the socks in wudu? Safwan said, لَكِن مِنْ غَائِطٍ وَبَوْلٍ وَنَوْمٍ. He said we can make wudu, or we're supposed to make wudu and wipe over the socks when what? When we go to the restroom, we defecate, when we urinate, and when we what? When we sleep. So that lets you know that what? These two are what? Naqith or nawaqith. They are nullifiers. Urine and feces. But number 2, wind from one's backside. Wind from one's backside. And you're going to find, it's going to make sense why I'm saying, why are you saying backside? Of course from the backside, right? No, not necessarily. So wind from what? From the backside. Is it a nullifier? Yes, it's a nullifier. It's a nullifier bil ijma' by agreement of the scholars. And it's evidenced by the hadith, which is agreed upon, collected by Bukhari and Muslim, on the authority of Abu Hurairah, in which the Prophet, he said, لا يقبل الله صلاة أحدكم إذا أحدث حتى يتوضأ. He said, Allah will not accept the prayer of any one of you if he experiences flatulence, until he what? Until he makes ablution. So then a man asked Abu Hurairah, he said, and what is this flatulence? Abu Hurairah said, fusa. He said, al-fusa or al-durab. He said it is wind with no sound, or wind with what? Sound. Meaning coming from what? From one's backside. Okay? طيب. So this is a what? A nullifier. Type number 3. What if the wind comes from the sexual organ? What if it comes from the sexual organ? Is that a naqid? Is it a naqid? But sometimes what happens is that a woman, when she's like standing up, for example, her uterus will collect what? It'll collect air. And then when she sits and presses on it, it will do what? It'll release that air. Okay? So when that air comes out of her front part, is that a naqid? What's the original rule? What's the original rule? It's not. It's not unless we have proof to the contrary. طيب. So in this case, we say it's not a naqid because what? There's no proof that it's a naqid. And also it doesn't come from what? It doesn't come from makan and najasa. It doesn't come from what? It doesn't come from the bowels. It doesn't come from a place where najasa is collecting. Right? That's the first thing. And the second thing is that we have no evidence that it's a naqid, although this is something which women have experienced since the beginning of time. And they definitely experienced it the time of the Messenger of Allah. And so he was definitely in need of what? Mentioning to them if it was something that was a naqid. And he never mentioned it. So we say in this case, this is not what? A naqid. Type number 4. There's like a white to off-white vaginal discharge. Okay? This discharge that comes out throughout the day for a woman, is that discharge a naqid min nawaqid al-wudu? Is it something which will nullify the ablution? Is it something which will nullify the ablution? What do you think?
No.
Don't know. What's the asl? What's the original rule? Mumtaz. Okay, so the original rule, it's not what? It's not a naqid. And we say about this the same thing we said about the previous one. That this is something which was common during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and it's been common for women since the beginning of time. And the Prophet ﷺ never indicated it was what? A naqid. We have no proof. Not from the Quran, not from the Hadith, not from Ashab Rasulullah, not from his companions. And so therefore this what? This vaginal discharge is also what? It's pure and it doesn't break the wudu. But ثم بعد ذلك we have al-madhi. And al-madhi, we discussed this early on, we mentioned this early on. Al-madhi, this is what they call prosthetic fluid. It's basically the fluid that a man secretes when he is aroused. Okay? This fluid is a naqid, and it's proven by the hadith, which is agreed upon on the authority of Adly. When he went to the Prophet, he asked the Prophet, because he said, Kuntu madda'an. I was a person who used to what? I used to secrete a lot of what? Madhi. And I didn't really know how to handle it, so I went to the Prophet, even though I was shy to do so because of what? Because of my relationship with his daughter. But I had to ask him, so I went and I asked him about this, and he said, Fihi al-wudu, waghsil dhakarak. He said, yes, you have to make wudu, and you also have to wash what? Wash your private area. But we also have al-wadi, and al-wadi, as we mentioned in the first lesson, we said al-wadi is that it's almost like a thick off-white secretion which follows what? Sometimes follows what? Urination. Okay? So this wadi is also what? A naqid. It's also a naqid. And the proof for that is the athar that was collected on authority of Ibn Abbas, in which he said regarding al-madhi wal-wadi wal-bowl. Ibn Abbas, he talked about prosthetic fluid, he talked about this fluid that follows urination, he talked about urination itself. He said, يَغْسِلْهُ وَيَتَوَضَّأْ مِنْهُ. He said the person who experiences any one of these should what? Should wash it and do what? And make wudu thereafter. Okay? So that's al-wadi. Last but not least, al-istihada. Al-istihada. What is al-istihada? Al-istihada is the irregular flowing of blood. So a woman may experience during the times when she's not experiencing her monthly visitor. Okay? When she's not having her period, she'll experience a flow of what? Blood. And she'll recognize it as such. Why? Because it comes at the time other than the time when her period should come, and also the blood, its appearance is what? Distinct. And it has a different what? Has a different appearance. It has a different viscosity, if you will, and also has a different what? A different smell. Okay? The blood of hayd has a very foul smell, and this blood won't have what? It won't have any smell. So she'll know it's what? It's not the blood of what? The menses, but it's a different what? Type of blood. That's what they call istihada. And some woman experiences what? This just irregular flowing of blood. So now this blood is a blood that what? Requires what? Wudu. It is a naqid from nawaqid al-wudu, and has been confirmed from Aisha that she used to command women who experience this extended flow of blood or this irregular flow of blood that they should do what? They should make what? Wudu. And they have to make wudu for every what? Every salat. Every salat. So these are all those 7 go back to number 1, which is what? Anything that comes out from the private parts. So the first one we said, the first nullifier is anything that comes out of the private parts. We said anything is too what? Too general. Have to look at each one specifically and discover its ruling. We mentioned a total of 7. The first one was urine and feces. We said it's what? Nullifier. Wind from one's backside. Wind from the sexual organ. Not a nullifier. The white to off-white vaginal discharge. Not a nullifier. Al-madhi, which is the one that comes out when a man is aroused. Nullifier. Al-wadi, which is what follows al-bowl. Nullifier. Al-istihada. Al-istihada, which is that irregular flow of blood, is also what? A nullifier. Mumtaz. All right, number 2. All right. The flowing of an impure substance from any other part of the body. Okay, so we mentioned some of the impure substances like bowl and feces and these types of things. Suppose these things came out from other than what? Than the private parts. Okay? Suppose they came out from elsewhere. Would they're coming out, for example, let's say a person got cut and then some urine or some feces came out of his what? Out of his side. Since it didn't come out from the place where it normally comes out, will that break the wudu? Yes. Why? Because the Sharia, it linked the ruling with what? With al-khuruj, with it coming out. And it didn't link it with what? Coming out from a specific place. So if bowl comes out of the body from anywhere, if urine comes out of the body from anywhere, it'll be what? A naqid. If feces come out from anywhere, it'll be what? A naqid. Okay. So number 3, blood, if it is a large quantity as opposed to a negligible amount. Blood, if it is a large quantity as opposed to a negligible amount. So when it comes to blood, is blood a naqid? It depends. Is it a nullifier? It depends. On what? On the quantity of it. What's the proof for this? The first proof that they offer, the ulama, is they mention the authentic statement of Ibn Umar, in which he said, إذا رأف الرجل أو أمذى أو ضرعه القيء فليعد الوضوء. He said, if a person has what? A nosebleed. He bleeds profusely from his nose. Or he what? He has a medi. He experiences medi. Or if he's overcome by what? Vomiting. Then that person should repeat his what? Repeat his wudu. But we also have a Bukhari. He mentions what? He mentions a narration from Ibn Umar in Mu'allaq form. In Mu'allaq form he mentions it. And in that he mentions that Ibn Umar, he had a pimple. And he squoze it. He squoze it until it what? It burst and it what? Some blood came out. But he didn't what? He didn't make wudu. So now in the first case he said that if a person has a nosebleed he should what? Make wudu. But in the second case he himself, he squozed his pimple. It bled and he didn't make wudu. So this guy said, okay, what's the difference? Is Ibn Umar a hypocrite? La wallah. He's not telling people one thing and then doing something else himself. But rather there's a difference between what? The quantity. When a person has a nosebleed, he bleeds what? A lot. And when a person has what? A pimple, he bleeds what? A little. And Ibn Abbas, he said, إِذَا خَرَجَ الدَّمْ وَكَانَ فَاحِشًا فَلْيُعِدْ الْوُضُوء. He said, if blood comes out of you, if it exits from you, and it's a lot, then make wudu. Repeat, make up your wudu. Repeat your wudu. وَإِنْ لَمْ يَكُنْ فَاحِشًا فَلَا يُعِدُ الْوُضُوء. He said, and if it's not a lot, then don't what? Then a person should not repeat his wudu. Then he said, وَالْفَاحِشْ مَا فَحُشَ فِي النَّفْسِ. He said, and how do we differentiate between a lot and a little? He said, it goes back to what? Your own determination. That you bleed from your nose and you say, man, that was a lot of blood. If you feel like that was a lot of blood, then what? It's a lot of blood. And if you feel like I had a little nosebleed, you know, I handled it, and it was only what? A little bit. Based upon what? You feel and what you determine. He says what? Then it's what? A little, and you can what? You don't have to repeat your wudu. So that's with respect to what? Blood. But number 4, vomit, if it is what? A large amount. And some of them, they use the yardstick of what? A mouthful, to say it's a large amount, as opposed to a negligible amount. And this is also supported by the author we just mentioned of Ibn Umar, in which he said that if he what? إِذَا ضَرَأَهُ الْقَيْء. If he's overcome by what? By vomiting. Okay? So that's a total of what? 4 so far. Let's go back and make sure we know what those are. Number 1 was what? What was number 1? The first naqid. What was the first nullifier? Anything that comes out of what? Out of the private parts. And we said that was divided into what? A total of? 7. The first one, urine and feces. Number 2, wind from one's backside. Number 3, wind from the private parts. Number 4, the white to off-white vaginal discharge. Number 5, al-madi. 6, al-wadi. 7, al-istihada. That was all number 1. Number 2, from the nullifiers, is what? The flowing of any impure substance from what? From anywhere on the body. Number 3, blood, if it's what? A large quantity. Number 4, vomit, if it's a large quantity. Okay. All right, it's getting a little cold in here now. Habib, could you? I mean, and I usually don't complain about the cold, brother. I love the cold. Not a big fan of the heat, but I see a couple people like their teeth are chattering, so I'm trying to have mercy on them. Subhanallah. La ilaha illallah. Right. All right. Number 5. Number 5, we're going to divide into A and B. Number 5, we're going to divide into A and B. 5A is loss of consciousness. But what I mean by loss of consciousness here is like if a person, they faint or they lose their faculties. Like a person who what? They become what? Insane. They become what? Insane. Okay? So loss of faculties or fainting, that's what we mean by A, loss of consciousness, okay? And this is something which will nullify your wudu bil ijma. The scholars are agreed that the one who loses consciousness in the sense that what he becomes insane, temporarily insane, or he faints, that person's what? Wudu is broken. He has to repeat his wudu. 5B is falling asleep. 5B is falling asleep. Alright? And the scholars of Islam in the books of fiqh, they have a lengthy discussion about this whole sleep thing. Why? Because there's a lot of hadith that seem to be contradictory, although the hadith never contradict themselves. Whenever there's an apparent contradiction, the contradiction is what? It's from our reading and interpretation, and not from what? The actual message in the hadith. Al-Muhim, the first thing you need to understand is that a known sleep is madhinnat hadath, and it's not a hadath fi nafsihi. It's something that what? A known is not something like urine. As soon as it comes out, your wudu is broken. But rather, sleep is something where you're not certain that you haven't done something else, which amounts to what? Hadath. So, Noam itself is not the hadath, but what Noam is, it's a state which prevents you from knowing if what? If you did something which amounts to a hadath. Okay? And the proof for this that the scholars use, one of the proofs they use is the hadith collected by Muslim on the authority of Anas, in which he said, كان أصحاب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ينتظرون العشاء. He said the companions of Muhammad, they used to wait for Salat al-Isha. And you know the Prophet liked to do what? Like to delay Salat al-Isha. So when he would delay it, they would start to do what? They would start to fall asleep. They would nod off. He said, حتى تحفق رؤوسهم. He said what? They would start to what? Nod off. They would fall asleep in their places. ثم يصلون ولا يتوضؤون. And then they would do what? They would get up and pray, and they wouldn't make what? They wouldn't make wudu, but they had what? They'd fallen asleep. Okay? So this shows you that what? It's not the sleep itself that a person what? Falls asleep. But what is it? It's that loss of what?
Awareness.
It's that loss of awareness of what? Of what could or may have happened. That's what it is. So then that brings us to the next thing. What is the sleep that actually will what? Will require to make wudu, because they were falling asleep and they didn't make wudu. He said that what we do is we always, or the scholars they say, we always differentiate between a nawm al-khafif wa nawm al-amiq. We always differentiate between what? A deep sleep and what? A light sleep, where you're aware of your faculties. So when you're aware of your surroundings, you fall asleep, but you're aware of what? Your surroundings. You hear people talking, you hear people moving around you, okay? And you're aware of your surroundings. That sleep doesn't require what? Doesn't require wudu. It's not a naqid. But once you fall asleep to the point where you what? You lose awareness of your surroundings, then at that point you need to what? Make wudu. Wadah? Okay? And it doesn't matter whether you what? Whether you lie down or whether you remain up. It's what differentiates is not the positioning. Because people can do what? Can lie down, close their eyes, just rest their eyes and still what? Still be aware of their surroundings. So what matters is not the position, but rather whether the sleep is what? Amiq, deep, or khafif. It's what? A light sleeping. طيب ثم بعد ذلك, what time is it then? 9:15? 9:30 is the actual iqamah. When I'm done, jazakallah khair, shukran. I don't think Sharif wants to hear that. He doesn't like that. But okay. All right, so we did up to 5. Let's review those really quickly. The first one was what? Anything that comes out of what? Private parts. And we have 7 of those. We mentioned those. Number 2, the flowing of any impure substance from what? Any part of the body. Number 3,
large amount of blood.
Mumtaz. Number 4,
Large amount of vomit.
Mumtaz. Number 5A, loss of consciousness, fainting or insanity. 5B, falling asleep. But it's what? A deep sleep. Mumtaz. But number 6, pay attention to me. Touching the male private part without a barrier between one's hand and the organ. Touching the male private part without a barrier between one's hand and the organ. طيب, there's a discussion about this issue, a little bit of a controversy, and it's because there are two ahadith which seem to contradict each other. Again, seem, because the ahadith of Rasulullah, they never contradict each other. But the first hadith is the hadith of Talq ibn Ali. Talq ibn Ali, in his hadith, he said that a man came to the Messenger of Allah and he said, Ya Rasulullah, massastu dhakari bis salat. He said, I touched my private in the prayer. O ar-rajulu yamassu dhakarahu hal yatawadda. He said, or he said, a person touches his private, should he make wudu? So the Prophet said in that hadith, or in response to that question, he said, La innama huwa bidatun mink. He said, no, it is only what? It is only a part of you. It's like touching what? Touching your arm, touching your thigh. It's a part of you. Okay? So based upon that, you would conclude what? It's not, it's not a naqid. And what would be the asl? The asl is that it's not a naqid. طيب, so stay with me. The asl, it's not a naqid until what? We have proof. Then on top of that, now we have a hadith which specifically gives the impression that what? It's not a naqid. But there's another hadith, collected by al-Khamsa, on the authority of Busra bin Safwan, right? Who said that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Man massa dhakrahu falyatawadda. Whoever touches his private, then let him what? Let him make wudu. Whoever touches his private, let him make wudu. That's pretty what?
General.
No, it's pretty, yeah, it's pretty explicit. Pretty explicit. Whoever touches his private, let him make wudu. Okay? All right. So now how do we reconcile between these two texts? The first thing that the scholars say is they say that this hadith of Talq was narrated, one of the narrators in it is a man by the name of Qais ibn Talq. Qais ibn Talq. And that he is what? Majhul. Ghair muwattaq. He's a person who's unknown, and nobody what? Nobody gave him the stamp of credibility. Okay, so that makes the hadith what? Da'if, problematic, right? That's the first thing. They also say, let's just say for the sake of argument, that the hadith is what? Authentic. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, the hadith is authentic. They said there's a couple things that make us, by way we can answer it. First of all, pay attention. The man said, I touched my private in salat. Tayyib, if you're in salat, don't you have to be what? Covered? So when he touched his private, do you think he touched it uncovered or covered? So it's as if the Prophet's talking about, he's giving a ruling on what? If you touch your private while it's covered, then what? It doesn't break your wudu. So that's one thing the scholars answer. They also say the hadith of Busra is what? Is later. It's a later hadith. That Busra accepted Islam, what? Later. So therefore, this hadith, the second one would what? Would abrogate the first one. That's another answer they give. Another thing they say is that al-hadir muqaddam al-mubih. A hadith which prohibits is always given precedence over what? A hadith which what? Gives permission. And last but not least, a naql an al-asl. The hadith which takes you from the asl to what? To a different ruling is always given precedence over the hadith which confirms what? The original ruling. What's the original ruling? Is it a naqid or not? It's not. That's the original ruling, because we said it's not a nullifier until what? Proven otherwise. So the naqil an al-asl, the hadith which takes us from that original to what? To a new ruling is always given precedence. And that will be the hadith of what? Busra. The hadith of Busra. So for this reason, the strongest opinion is that the male organ, if it's touched with no ha'il, with nothing between it and the hand, then what? It breaks the wudu. Now there's a few things I'm going to mention that are related to this that might come up potentially as questions. So before they come up, what about a woman's private part? The Prophet used the word al-dhakar. Al-dhakar is specific for what? The male organ. Okay? And it's not something that can what? You can make an analogy. You can't make qiyas because they're what? They're not the same. So again, if we go back to the original rule, that something is not a nullifier until proven otherwise, then her private is not what? It's not something which if she touches it or he touches it, it will what? Nullify wudu. That's the first one. Second thing, What if the wife touches the husband? Ha.
She needs to make wudu.
Ahsant. It's a nullifier. Because the Prophet didn't differentiate between who touches. If the dhakr is touched, then what? It breaks the wudu. A woman has a child, a male child. She's cleaning the child. She cleans the child. Does she have to make wudu from that? The scholars, they say no. Why? Because they say Zahir al-Hadith, the apparent meaning of the Hadith is what? The adult male organ, right? And also it's something that so many women experience this, clean their children. The Prophet would definitely, if it was something that breaks the wudu, the Prophet would what? Would have pointed it out. Last but not least, well, I'm not going to say this only because we have children and it may be a little bit too explicit. So I won't say that part. Okay. But let's go to number 7, consumption of camel's meat, eating camel's meat. Okay, now this might not be necessarily applicable. I don't know how much camel meat we have here in the United States. But some of you might travel to Saudi Arabia and they eat it a lot there. And they also drink what? They drink the milk. It's very popular there. So you may travel there, somebody might host you. You might eat camel meat and you might eat camel's meat and you'll need to know what's the ruling. And according to the hadith of Muslim, on the authority of Jabir ibn Samurah, the Prophet said, or a man came to the Messenger of Allah and he said, Ya Rasulullah, atawadda min luhum al-ibil? Qala na'am. He said, O Messenger of Allah, should I make wudu from eating camel's meat? And the Prophet said what? Yes. There's some controversy as the hadith abrogated, hadith not abrogated. Apparently, it's not abrogated. The hadith is what? It's still what? Thabit. Still active, still valid. And so therefore, camel's meat will do what? Break the wudu. Last but not least, not last but not least, number 8, apostasy. If a person what? Leaves the deen and comes back to the deen. That leaving of the deen will do what? Will nullify all of their deeds, which includes what? The deed of what? Of al-wudu. Okay? And the proof of that is the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which He said, لَإِنْ أَشْرَكْتَ لَيَحْبَطَنَّ عَمَلُكَ. If you disbelieve in Allah, then what? All of your deeds will become what? Null and void. And then last but not least, the hadith, ghusl al-mayyit, or ghasl al-mayyit, washing the dead body. According to Ibn Abbas and Abu Hurairah, the one who washes a deceased person should make what? Should make wudu. So that's all 9. We'll review those quickly. No, after obviously, because what breaks your wudu is what? The actual washing. Yeah. And they also recommended al-ghusl, but that's recommended and not what? Wajib. All right, we'll go through really quickly. The first one we said was anything that exits from what? But that needs what? That needs further explanation, because there are some things that come out which are pure and therefore wudu is not nullified. Number 2, the flowing of what? An impure substance from any part of the body. Number 3, blood, if it's a large quantity. Number 4, vomit, if it's what? A large quantity. Number 5, loss of consciousness because of fainting or insanity. 5B, but what does detail? Deep sleep. Number 6, Number 6, touching the male organ without what? Without a barrier between the hand and the organ. Number 7, consumption of camel's meat. Number 8, ar-ridda, apostasy. And number 9, wal-akhir, ghasl al-mayyit, washing what? The deceased. And the last thing, we'll just say this, we said this at the beginning, we'll reiterate it. So we said this at the beginning, we'll reiterate it. If one is certain of his or her purity and questions if he or she has violated that purity, or he or she is certain that they have violated their purity, but is uncertain if he or she has purified himself thereafter, then that person should act in accordance with that which they are certain of. We always act according to a certainty. وَالْيَقِينُ لَا يَزُولُ بِالشَّكِّ. And the thing that you're certain of cannot be removed by what? By doubt. So if you're certain of your purity, you're pure until proven otherwise. And if you're certain of your impurity, you're impure until proven otherwise. Any questions, comments, complaints? Follow the Sheikh.
Why and when the scholars did ijma?
Like basically, ijma, there are different levels of ijma. So sometimes they look at who are the people who agreed on something. So for example, ijma al-sahaba, ijma al-muslimun, ijma al-ulama, ijma ulama of a certain time period, etc. So that's sometimes they look at the person who made the ijma. Also, sometimes they look at how the ijma was what? Achieved. So sometimes you have what they call, they have something called al-ijma al-lafzi or al-ijma al-mantuq bihi. This ijma is where everybody what? They say the same thing, word for word. And that's something that's rare. It rarely happens. Then you have something called ijma sukuti. Ijma sukuti means what? It's when somebody or some group of scholars or the Muslims or the companions, they say something. And other people, they what? They hear of it. And rather than object, voice disapproval, they what? They remain quiet. And their being quiet is an indication that they what? They're in agreement. They're in approval. So most of the ijma'at, most of the consensus and unanimous agreements that we have are this ijma' sukuti. So what will happen, so when they say, for example, وَهَذَا إِجْمَعُ الصَّحَابَةِ or أَجْمَعَ عَلَيْهِ الصَّحَابَةِ, they'll say, for example, the companions of Muhammad are agreed upon this. What do they base that on? They base it on the fact that one or a number of the companions said something. وَاشْتَهَرَ قَوْلُهُم, and the statement they made become what? It becomes common knowledge. Everybody knows about it. And none of the companions do what? Object or express disapproval. So the fact that they remain quiet indicates that they're what? In agreement. So most of these ijma'at, most of the ones, whether it be from the companions or those who came after them, are the ijma' of this type. Now what authorized the person to say that nobody objected? Nobody voiced an objection. It's what their it's their extensive what? I'm gonna start charging for disturbances, man. I'm gonna have like a little bucket, right? And anytime like certain person makes a disturbance, they have to put something in the bucket. And I'll have like different levels. So for example, if you do this, you have to put this much in the bucket. And you do this, you have to put this in the bucket. And watch. I'm gonna be a rich man before it's all said and done. You watch, man. I'm just teasing you guys. So anyway, so how do they know? How does somebody say with definitively, hey, there's no difference of opinion on this? They all agree. Did they go and ask each person? No. But what they do is, one, is their reading is so extensive and their research is so detailed that they don't come across anybody who disagreed. So they're able to say with great confidence that what? This is something what? Agreed upon. And it's not something that everybody can do. But you have certain scholars who, because of their extensive knowledge, their extensive reading, and their credibility, they have that authority. And everybody recognizes them as authorities in this area. So for example, you have people like Ibn Mundir. When he says something, he has a book called Al-Awsat, which is a combination of what? All these different types of what? Ijma. When this person says that, it has what? Credibility because of what? Kathrat al-Ittila'i. Because he what? He read so much. Ibn Abd'Llah is another one. Ibn Taymiyyah is another one. Ibn al-Qayyim. These are scholars. An-Nawawi. These are scholars that their extensive reading is what? Unquestioned. It's unmatched. And so if there was something that the scholars disagreed about, there was one scholar who disagreed, they would what? They would be aware of it. So that's what we base it on, basically, or the scholars base it on.
See, I asked us, we had a discussion about the scholars and who to take your knowledge from and who are the scholars. And where they study is important too as well. You just can't go with Joe Blow and like you said, and where he studied, who got to get his knowledge from.
I mean, there's no question.
We have to know who the scholars are past and present and the scholars of today.
But what I'll say is this, because obviously there's no question that we have to take knowledge. We have the famous statement of Muhammad ibn Sirin, in which he said, "Inna hadha al-ilma ilma deen, fanduru amman ta'khuduna deenakum." He said, this knowledge is a knowledge of the religion of Allah, so be careful from whom you take your knowledge. And the early Muslims, from the companions and those who came after them, they used to say things like this. They would say, always take your knowledge from someone who's deceased, because the person who's dead, whatever they died upon is what they're about. But the person who's living, he could be on the truth today and on falsehood tomorrow. So I'm going to be honest with you. What I would recommend is I would recommend being careful from attaching yourself, joining yourself at the hip with a contemporary. Because we hear about this all the time, especially in this climate that we have of the gunslinger climate, where all of these scholars and junior scholars, everybody seems to be out to what? To gun down someone else and knock someone off the manhaj, or tell us that this person is not a follower of truth, etc. So in that time, in that climate, where you have all of this back and forth and who's who and people are all confused, you'll never be confused with what? With the likes of Ibn Mundhir, with the likes of An-Nawawi, with the likes of Al-Bukhari, with the likes of, you'll never be confused, you'll never go astray. And so it's important for us to what? To hold fast to those, and then we can use what they believed in, what they followed, and what they taught as what? As exactly as a criterion or a yardstick to measure what? The people of today. Does that make sense? And I've been given the signal to stop.
No, not to stop. I think there is an issue need to be discussed here.
تفضل.
And one of the brothers requested me to be present to finalize it on the spot. We don't want to take 15 hours for it. We can take 5 minutes max.
طيب.
If it's possible.
Allah is khair. Allah is khair.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. What's the issue?
No, you go ahead.
No, I'm done. I'm done, Sheikh. That was it.
Okay, let me step in here so we don't take 15 hours and go back and forth. When I spoke to you about, inshallah, maybe what we're going to do for Ramadan as far as
Allah
changing it, maybe we go ahead and put that out there and see what we can do. I know Ramadan is coming up. We still have some classes between now and then. What may be a suitable schedule for you, and what's also going to work as far as the availability of the musalla or the people or whatever. Maybe something we can go ahead and...
That's a good thing. I don't know if we'll be able to resolve it today, but my suggestion was that we could move the class just in Ramadan, because Habib made a real good point last week. He said that when you come to the month of Ramadan and you cancel a class, it's very hard. He used an expression, I'm not going to use the expression he used, but basically he said that when you try to resume the class after Ramadan, it's hard to what? To get the people back in the saddle. And alhamdulillah, we have a good hudur, we have good attendance, and we want to keep it like that. So what I suggested to him was we move the class to Saturday, and it could be just before iftar by maybe 20 minutes. We'll shorten it, but we'll, for the consistency's sake, and we'll do something in that period. So everybody should be here anyway, coming anyway. So we could do 20 minutes or so before Salat al-Maghrib, before iftar, and we could do that for the month of Ramadan. That was my suggestion. I would imagine people are free at that time, and people usually come into the mosque anyway, so they just come a little bit earlier. That was my suggestion. If that's something which is feasible for everyone, or for most of us, never can please everyone, but for most of us, that would suggest. Also, if the Sheikh is open to that idea, obviously. Do you like that idea? Do you hate that idea?
You're the Sheikh.
No, I'm the Sheikh. You're the Sheikh. So that's why I'm asking you. What do you think about that suggestion?
Let's see if most of the people, I'm not going to say all the people, most of the people for it. And let's go with it.
So let's just do this. Let's just see a show of hands if you feel like that's something that will work for you.
For Saturday, you say?
Saturday, 20 minutes
for Ramadan, we're going to move it back to Monday?
It'll go back to Monday, yeah. No, we won't say on Saturday.
Why not Monday and Ramadan?
I just figured because of the work day and people coming home trying to cook, and then I might not be coming to the mosque for iftar on Mondays, but there will the weekend, people have more free time. That's what I was thinking.
By the way, I'm not contradicting what you're saying. We have iftar here every night.
I know that, but I'm saying will people really assemble like on a Monday like they would on a weekend? That's all I was saying. That's where I was coming from with it.
Is it suitable for you first?
Wallahi, I can, if I'll commit to it, yeah. If
I think you should go with it, and those who can make it, alhamdulillah, those who could not.
Because I didn't see too many hands go up.
And I didn't see too many.
Because you said only 20 minutes.
Huh?
Yeah, we need one time.
Only 20 minutes.
Okay, what do you want to do? An hour?
Yeah, at least. Maybe longer.
Nah, so that's a lot of time.
Ramadan does not mean for people to be more lazy.
Eh?
It's a good deed during
طيب خلاص, an hour before Maghrib. Let me see a hand. Let me see hands. Let me see hands. Because a lot of hands not coming up. Saturday, an hour before Maghrib.
So you're talking about 7 o'clock.
Huh? Yeah.
About 7 o'clock.
Khalas. It looks that way.
7 o'clock Saturday?
7 o'clock Saturdays. Inshallah. 7:30, depending on whatever Maghrib is. An hour before Maghrib.
And by the way, we have the text messages now that in case anybody wants to involve. Okay? This is 84483, and you can give automatic text message from the masjid about any event you're going or something emergency, you will get it right away. The information on the center political board, the project, the door, you can get.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله